In this lesson, I want to go over the finish on the freestyle stroke, and if there's one area where I see asymmetry with the best swimmers, it's on the finish. In saying that, quite often I see a perfect hand and then one hand that's in neutral or that has a little bit of flexion. So let me show you what I'm talking about. We went over the front end, the high set, the pull pattern underneath. Take a look at my wrist and my forearm right now. It's in a neutral position, but to set up the finish, I want my wrist to begin to hyperextend at the end. And this is hyperextension. So take a look at my elbow bend. I'm about 170 degrees, and my wrist is almost at a wrist joint lock position. In other words, if I was getting out of the pool and I'm pushing myself up, that's kind of the position that you have here, and it's more kind of a sweeping motion because the hand is accelerating back up towards the surface. A lot of good swimmers will say, there's no way I swim like that. And I'll say, take a look at the video underneath. And we should see this wrist hyperextension at the end. And quite often, because there's no surface tension, the hand comes out of the water, and we see the wrist go into flexion right here. And they'll say, no, I'm flicking my hand. That makes me go faster. No, it doesn't. It'll actually create more drag. So if you can think about hand is underneath your ribs, wrist goes from neutral to wrist hyperextension to near full extension at the end, and then the hand is coming out of the surface of the water, and it can go into flexion as I'm showing you right now to set up the recovery. So again, wrist hyperextension on the finish. I do lots of little crazy things with single paddles on this so you can get a feel for it. And we'll take a look at Kelsey in the water here in just a sec. Kelsey's going to demonstrate the finish on this by doing a double arm kind of butterfly stroke right now. And think freestyle when we're doing this, because the hand position without the shoulder rotation, which we will have in the water, and that's the finish of freestyle. So she has a nice high elbow set, and if we stop her on the finish right there, you can see that the wrist is in hyperextension, the arm is almost extended to about 160 to 170 degrees, and then she can do her underwater recovery and do this full double arm stroke. And then we can move to a alternating freestyle stroke. And we have one arm finishing, high elbow set, and let's stop it on the finish again so we can see the finish with this right hand right there. Take a look at the wrist on the end, wrist hyperextended, elbow almost at full extension, but just shy of that, and then that goes into recovery. And this wrist hyperextension is something that you're gonna actually have to look at when you're working with the stretch cords. Now let's really exaggerate this with a pull pattern that sweeps underneath your body, and then we'll have wrist flexion at the end. So go real slow where we do it improperly at the end. So underneath, and then wrist flexion at the end. And we see a lot of people doing this on the stroke, and we really want to minimize where you're pressing through with your fingertips at the end of that stroke, as she's doing right now, and coming back to the proper one, which again is that hyperextension on the end, and stop on the finish on this next one, right there, and that's perfect. Okay, work on your finish. We got it. This finish, as Kelsey demonstrated, really finishes with a wrist hyperextension to maximize the surface area of your palm. And it's a critical area that I see with a lot of the advanced swimmers where they have one very strong hand and one weak hand. And typically we want to finish the hand in extension or in flexion, where you say, I'm going to apply a lot of pressure, so I'm going to flick my hand at the end, or I'm going to draw it out. But don't get confused on the finish by thinking I have to flick my hand at the end. Make sure that you feel that hyperextension. A very simple way to do it is just to back your butt up next to a wall, put your hands behind you on that wall, and now you know what that hyperextension feels like. We can move one hand out in front, do the doggy paddle, alternate paddles as I showed you, or Kelsey showed you in the water, and then you're gonna get a really good feel of minimizing the pressure with your fingertips, put a little more pressure on the heel of your hand, and then you'll have a really solid finish. And what does this do? Well, you think, oh, geez, this last little bit, the last 10% of our stroke, it'll really help the front end, so you get a better handle on the front end for your high elbow set on the front end of your stroke. So they work in harmony. You have to have a good finish to have a good freestyle.